Good morning. This is Northern Light for Tuesday, October 31st. Happy Halloween. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe.
The state's budget office is recommending New York limit spending on feeding and housing migrants in a mid-year report. Some local governments want the federal government to step in.
But the city and the state can't count on that at this point. There's no reason to expect that relief is coming, so it is something that the city and state will have to deal with and manage themselves.
Also, the Ku Klux Klan terrorized families in St. Lawrence County in the 1920s and 30s. We'll hear from a local historian about the lasting impacts of the region's demographics.
They managed to, with the help of the local judge, to basically eliminate that black community. Whereas in 1920, there were over 50 black men working at Alcoa. By 1930, there were 3.
Also on the show, we'll meet a tour guide, a ghost tour guide in Jefferson County.
I could tell ghost stories every day from now until I passed, and I probably wouldn't be able to tell all of them.
The spooky story of Tug Hill Annie coming up on Northern Light. Stick with us.
Broadcast of Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio is supported by Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And Fisher, Bissett, Muldowney, and McCardle, attorneys and counselors at law with offices in Malone, Tupper Lake, and Saranac Lake. 800-941-5001.
This is Northern Light. I'm Monica Sandreski.
And I'm Todd Moe. When we think of the Ku Klux Klan, we often think of burning crosses and lynchings in the South, but the KKK was active here in the North Country, too. In the 1920s and 30s, the white supremacist group terrorized people in St. Lawrence County, driving out most of the area's black population. Catherine Wheeler reports on a local historian who's uncovering how the Klan has had a lasting impact on the region's demographics.
The Ku Klux Klan's presence in St. Lawrence County rose after the showing of the racist propaganda film The Birth of a Nation. Historian Brian Thompson says the local press was supportive of the film's racist themes.
Starting in 1922, and after that, the Klan started to gain momentum here. And over the next 6 to 7 years, it was a very prominent force with rallies being held all over the county. The largest rally I found recorded was some 5,000 people on the Potsdam-Norwood Road, where they recruited 500 new members at one rally. There were chapters all over the county. There was a chapter in Brazee Corners, in DePoyster, Potsdam, Messina, Ogdensburg, Oswegatchie, to name a few of the places.
Thompson's the historian for the town of DeKalb in St. Lawrence County. He's given talks about the Klan and has written about the North Country's black communities. Thompson says anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 people would attend Klan rallies. He says they recruited entire social organizations to join their ranks.
The Klan was a pyramid scheme. So if you joined, you paid your $10 and the Kliegel got so much and the local chapter got so much and the national chapter did. If you brought your friend along and he joined, you got $1 of his $10.
Thompson says the Klan was focused on forcing out the county's black community.
And there were a large number of black workers in Messina working for Alcoa in the early 20s. They managed to, with the help of the local judge, to basically eliminate that black community. Whereas in 1920, there were over 50 black men working at Alcoa. By 1930, there were 3.
Thompson says the Klan and public officials were using the courts to drive away black residents. Judges would say you can go to jail or leave town.
Local elected officials who deliberately in court said, you can either have this punishment for speeding or you can leave town on the 6 o'clock train. And that was given over and over again in printed records. but only to African American people living in the county, with one exception. One Russian immigrant had the same sentence.
Thompson says the Klan's violence also targeted Catholics, Jews, and immigrants in the county.
There was one recorded incident where on one night a cross was burned on every Catholic household between the village of Canton and the village of Pirates, which at that time was a big paper mill town, and most of the employees were Eastern European immigrants and are largely Catholic. And they sent letters to many people telling them they should leave the community for the good of the community.
Thompson says mentions of the Klan in local newspapers started to die out when the state passed a law requiring oath-bearing organizations to divulge membership lists. He says records show local chapters existed within St. Lawrence County through the early 1930s. Thompson says the Klan's lasting impact is clear in the county's racial demographics. Between the mid-1800s and up until the 1920s, there was a consistent black population of about 200 people.
It stayed that way constantly through 1920. By 1930, there's just about 50 black people left, and other than 3 or 4 of them, they're all residents of the St. Lawrence Psychiatric Hospital. So the only people who came here for medical treatment from the whole of northern New York. And the legend has become there were never any black people here.
He says white supremacy drove out a population that could have grown during the Great Migration of the mid-1900s. And he asks, what could have been if the black community in the North Country had been allowed to flourish?
We forced our black community out. Niagara Falls, they had 300 black people there at the beginning of World War II in 1940. By the end of World War II, with the migration north and the war industry, in 1950, they had 3,000 black people. If we had let the 150 black people stay in Messina, would there have been 1,500 by 1950? And what difference would that have made in terms of supporting a vibrant black community?
Thompson says knowing this history helps combat deliberate attempts to whitewash the community's history. He says if we can learn from it, we'll be better equipped to challenge similar events in the present and future. Catherine Wheeler, North Country Public Radio.
You're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. It's 8 minutes past 8. Good morning. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Coming up, we'll catch up with Tanya Roy, a ghost tour guide in Jefferson County. That's in just a few minutes here on Northern Light.
Music by Evan Veenstra in Gananoque, Ontario. Check out more music by Evan and lots of other regional musicians on our website anytime. We call it the Underscore Project, and you'll find it at ncpr.org/underscore. Northern Light is supported by Adirondack Foundation, connecting generous donors with the causes they care about in the places they love today, tomorrow, and always. More at adirondackfoundation.org. And St. Lawrence Health, offering My Care, a way for patients to access health information and stay connected to their care team. Registration is available at stlawrencehealthsystem.org.
Governor Kathy Hochul held a roundtable discussion with Cornell University students on Monday following a series of anti-Semitic threats. The threats were posted online and targeted at the Jewish community in Ithaca and specifically the Center for Jewish Living at Cornell.
We will not tolerate threats or hatred or anti-Semitism or any kind of hatred that makes people feel vulnerable. and exposes people and makes them feel insecure in a place that they should be enjoying their campus life without fear that someone could cause them harm.
Campus, local, and state police are involved, and the FBI was notified of a potential hate crime. The governor says they're working to identify the people who made the anti-Semitic threats to hold them accountable.
A prison worker in the Adirondacks pleaded guilty to forging doctor's notes and earning thousands of dollars from sick leave. Kathleen Bader worked at the Adirondack Correctional Facility in Raybrook. According to a release from the State Inspector General, Bader forged 28 doctor's notes over 4 months. During that time, she earned more than $4,500 in sick leave benefits. Bader pleaded guilty to a felony charge and was sentenced to 5 years probation and has to pay her earnings back to the state.
New York's budget deficit is not as large as previously projected, according to Governor Hochul's budget office. The mid-year budget report also recommends that the state place limits on how much it spends to house and feed the migrants coming into New York. From Albany, Karen DeWitt reports.
Budget Director Blake Washington recommends that New York limit its investment in the care and housing of the tens of thousands of migrants who are entering the state. Washington says New York already committed $1.5 billion to assist New York City in the crisis and is adding nearly $350 million more to fund housing at Floyd Bennett Field. That's a former naval air base. He says instead of footing the bill for indefinite stays in hotel rooms, the state must consider limiting its help in the future to legal aid services and case management workers to connect the asylum seekers with jobs. Hochul, who last month warned that the spending on the migrant crisis could reach $4.5 billion, now says that amount would be unsustainable.
We are at capacity, and we have already asked the taxpayers of New York to foot $2 billion. There will be more support next year. There will be more support, but I just want to make sure that we're managing expectations because I also have to manage an entire budget that funds education, health care, child care, and other services that New Yorkers want to make sure are not cut.
Patrick Orecki with the watchdog group Citizens Budget Commission says it's wise to try to control spending in a crisis that's been largely left to the state and New York City to manage and finance and is proving to be longer and more costly than originally expected.
The obvious and I think most reasonable and fair solution would be for the federal government to step up and address on both the policy and the dollars this issue that is a federal problem. But the city and the state can't count on that at this point. There's no reason to expect that relief is coming. So it is something that the city and state will have to deal with and manage themselves.
Hochul's budget director also says that a $9.1 billion projected deficit for next year has been cut in half to around $4.3 billion, and that future year projected gaps, while still several billion dollars, are now lower as well. The deficits are due to a decrease in tax collections, especially income tax payments, and federal relief payments during the pandemic, which left the state flush with cash, have now ended. In September, Hochul asked all of the state's agencies to hold the line on spending in their requests for the new budget. Orecki with Citizens Budget Commission says that's welcome news.
That generally is a good thing because the state has found over the course of the year so far some places where there's underspending, and they can use that to close gaps and also some recurring savings as well, which is good.
Orecki warns, though, that even though the large gap has been reduced, New York still has a structural imbalance going forward. And he says spending growth will need to be tamped down further to match the amount of tax revenues that are coming in. In Albany, I'm Karen DeWitt.
You're listening to Northern Light here on North Country Public Radio. I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. In just a minute, a ghost story straight from the North Country, the tale of Tug Hill Annie coming up. Then stick around after the show for Bird Note and a profile of the vampire ground finch. When seeds are scarce, they start eating other birds. These cannibals of the sky coming up at 8:42. But first, we are not taking a look at the weather. We've got a spooky poem for Halloween sent in from listener and poet Susan Jeffs. She's based near Lake George and introduced her poem, Ghost Poem.
I wrote this poem after being at a writer's residency in Maine on an island off the northeast coast of Maine, where fog is like a living presence every morning and on and off throughout the day. And so it was a place where a lot of words and poems were in my mind, there to write. But I think after I left the place, I got thinking about, fog and the sounds that come through fog. And you never know quite where something is, but they're out there. So I got thinking of that in terms of poems, ghost poems. Sometimes I sense them sitting just out of sight, like a ship around a point or just offshore, ensconced in fog. You feel their weighty presence, maybe even see their faint outline or a bit of color pushing through. You hear them listing gently as the tide moves in or out, and then that unmistakable sound of mast against metal, like a bell or a chime, a note awakened, trying to work its way into this world.
Susan Jeffs of Diamond Point reading her poem, Ghost Poem. She sent that into the station by emailing monica@ncpr.org. And if you've got a poem or a bit of sound that you want to share, we would love to hear from you too. Send an email to me, monica@ncpr.org.
Ghosts are big business in the U.S. There are thousands of movies, books, podcast episodes, all at your fingertips for Halloween. There are haunted houses, and there are ghost tours where guides walk you along supposedly haunted streets and sometimes into pubs or hotels with a history of apparitions. Ethan Shanty caught up with one ghost tour guide and has her story.
I visited Tanya Roy earlier this month at her home in Adams in Jefferson County. She says that the house that she lives in now is haunted by a pair of friendly ghosts and told me that her family loves sharing ghost stories with one another.
I could tell ghost stories every day from now until I passed, and I probably wouldn't be able to tell all of them.
Halloween has always been kind of a big deal for Roy, and about 8 years ago, she started leading ghost tours in and around her community.
I got into ghost tours because I really just loved history. That was always a big part of it for me, was things happened right where we are standing. There is no way that you will ever exhaust all of the ghost stories, and not only do people want to hear them, but people really want to tell them.
In her day job, Roy is a literacy coach, and when she's on vacation from teaching, she and her kids will look around to see if there's a ghost tour that they can go on themselves. When she leads a ghost tour herself, she often gets asked by new people to research their unexplainable experience.
People who have had experiences will seek me out. People who have loved ones who have passed and feel still connected to them in some way and have a story that goes along with that will want to share those, and they want those stories to be told as well.
A few years ago, she was asked by the Historical Society in Clayton to lead a tour and tell the story of Tug Hill Annie. Tug Hill Annie was a fiercely independent young woman born in the early 1900s who was given the task of caring for her family as a teenager after her mother left. Annie didn't want that responsibility, though, and the only way that she could get out of it and be on her own was to get married.
To cope with the fact that she was unhappy in her life, Annie began drinking, and she began to have affairs. At one point, when she was just about 27 years old, after several days of drinking and carousing, ran out of wine. On her way home, she crashed. She was speeding, and she took a corner too fast, and she crashed her truck into a tree, and she was decapitated. Annie wandered 177. If the stories are to be believed, sometimes she was carrying her head, sometimes she was carrying a jug of wine, looking for her children.
That story has terrified adults and kids alike since the 1940s. And as teenagers, Roy and her friends would often find themselves driving around Route 177 looking for Annie or any of the other ghosts that are said to haunt that part of the North Country. Roy says that urban legends and ghost stories are steeped in the history of a place, so it's a part of her job as a ghost tour guide to continue to tell the story of people who have passed on.
Ghost stories keep us connected to the past, and they also help us to feel like there is something bigger than just who we are and what we have in the moment. Those ghosts and the people that they were when they were alive are not done having their stories be told. If you're one of the people who is lucky enough to be able to tell them, then you're pretty lucky to be trusted not only by the living people who surround you, but also by the people who have passed and become the ghosts that are trusting you to tell them.
Whether you're traveling along Route 177 to try to catch a glimpse of Tug Hill Annie, or you're taking a haunted tour at the Fort William Henry Museum in Lake George, the North Country has a rich history of supernatural experiences. For NCPR, I'm Ethan Shanty in Adams.
Ghostbusters, who doesn't love it? Time coming up now on about 8:23. Good morning. I'm Monica Sandreski here with Todd Moe, and you're listening to Northern Light right here on North Country Public Radio. So many ways to celebrate Halloween throughout the North Country today. Coming up at the Aviation Mall in Queensbury, they're having a haunted house from 11 until 7 today. Over in Watertown, the Salmon Run Mall will host trick-or-treaters from 6 until 7 o'clock tonight. Then in the Central Adirondacks, Lake Placid is putting on its annual Halloween Pride downtown starting at noon, and local businesses will be handing out candy until about 5 o'clock. And over in Saranac and Tupper Lake, they're also hosting downtown trick-or-treating events. The one in Saranac Lake is from 3 to 5, while Tupper's is from 7 until 9 o'clock tonight. And also, if you've got a good costume, don't forget to head to the Halloween costume contest at the Arkell Museum in Canajoharie, New York. Before you head out into the neighborhood, join them for a Halloween costume contest in the Great Hall of the Canajoharie Library. It's free. All ages are welcome. They've got prizes, snacks, candy, and coloring for all. You can find out more at arkellmuseum.org or head over to our website, ncpr.org/calendar.
All this month, the Crane School of Music is putting on a centennial celebration titled The Music of Gregoria Caritas Suki, a celebration of her music. It starts tomorrow night, Wednesday, November 1st at 7:30 with music by the Crane Jazz Ensemble, Michael Dudley, director. It's in the Proscenium Theater at SUNY Potsdam. And then also continues a concert of instrumental solo and chamber music on Sunday, November 5th at 7:30 in the evening at Snell Theater at the Crane School of Music. And there are events throughout the month in celebration of the music of Gregoria Caritas Suki at the Crane School of Music at SUNY Potsdam. And you can find out more information on the SUNY Potsdam website.
Over in Anchiota, they're also doing a twist on the Halloween celebration. The Adirondack Death Care Community is inviting you to their annual Halloween gathering tonight. It's called Samhain, Remembering Our Deceased Beloved. They'll have art, food, and costumes. It's all at the station in Anchiota. Costumes are encouraged. Donations are welcome. You can find out more from the Adirondack Death Care Community by emailing them at adkdeathcarecommunity@gmail.com.
Also coming up, Listening to Water. This is an ongoing series of lectures and conversations at the Brush Art Gallery at St. Lawrence University in Canton. Listening to Water follows the rivers and streams that flow from the Adirondacks to the St. Lawrence. And it's happening at the Brush Art Gallery, St. Lawrence University in Canton. You can get more information, stlawu.edu/gallery, and that continues through December 9th. Listening to Water, the Brush Art Gallery at St. Lawrence University.
And before we head off, I want to remind you of two other exhibits going on. One at the Tannery Pond Community Center in North Creek. There's a fiber partnership between a felter and a weaver that's brought together to discuss what they share in common. It's Charlene Leary and Joy Muller-Makula. They said that they source their inspiration and their materials from the natural world. That's on display really just through the end of the week. And you can find out more from the Tannery Pond Community Center in North Creek at tannerypondcenter.org. The other exhibit I wanted to mention is in Argyle. It's the Whiting Art and Frame. It's called On Our Own. The exhibit features work by Robert Whiting and Susan Bayard Whiting. It's open during regular hours through the end of the month. Really, today is the last day by appointment. It's free and open to the public, and you can find out more from whitingartwork.com.
I want to mention an exhibit that continues through the end of November. It just opened a few days ago. It's in Malone at the North Star Gallery on Pearl Street. Indigenous Many Perspectives exhibit. It's a gorgeous colorful pieces and perspectives made by it's art made by Indigenous artists on display at the North Star Gallery on Pearl Street in Malone, and that exhibit continues through the end of November. Check it out, North Star Gallery on Pearl Street in Malone. Indigenous Many Perspectives exhibit, and the hours are 10 to 5.
I ain't afraid of no ghosts. Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! If you're all alone, pick up the phone and call Ghostbusters! I ain't afraid of no ghosts.
That's it for the show for the day. Morning Edition continues in just a bit. Then join us for some Halloween specials on NCPR later today. Coming up on Trail Mix with Sarah Sclafidi McGuire from 3 to 5. A relaxed and upbeat mix of new folk, old folk, pop and blues, soul and Americana, but she's got a Halloween special for us. Then after that, it's All Things Considered, and it's spooky season, which means there's no better time to curl up on the couch and binge this year's scariest movies. Horror scholar Rebecca McKendry talks about her favorites coming up on ATC between 5 and 7 o'clock. And also this evening, more Halloween music between 8 and 9 on Global Village. Things are about to get a bit scary. Join Global Village's Halloween special for lots of ghoulish global sounds from Tom Waits, Lila Downs, Willie Bobo, Brave Combo, and more. That's later this evening between 8 and 9 o'clock right here on North Country Public Radio.
I I ain't afraid of no ghosts. Don't get caught alone, oh no. Ghostbusters! When it comes through your door, unless you just want some more, I think you better call Ghostbusters! Oh, who you gonna call? Ghostbusters!
I'm Todd Moe.
And I'm Monica Sandreski. Happy Halloween.
Think you better call